Recently, the people who have talked with me about the identity abuse theory have had one of two responses. Either they've been able to embrace it, and I've been able to watch God change their hearts and their minds and their lives, and be able to live in a joy and a freedom that they've never known before, and actually know themselves for the first time, and even understand God for the first time. There are others, however, who have difficulty really embracing the truths about who they are. They hear the truths and they understand in their mind, but they have a hard time surrendering to the truths. And the first thing that most often I hear is, yeah, but. They'll say, well, I understand this and that, but, and then a long string of I can't, or I don't know how, or what do I do? And so I want to address some of those. The biggest issue is fear. And most people who have had abuse have learned over life how to control certain areas of their life, to reduce incoming information that might be scary, or to protect themselves from things that they weren't able to protect themselves as a child. And oftentimes, most of the time, all the time, those are actually fallacies of protection, because God is in control. And we try to do things that help protect ourselves. But if you do that to an extreme, then you end up not really living life. And you live in a sense of fear and a feeling of being unsafe all the time. And so therefore, you actually reject incoming information. You have to live with a concept of, this can't be true for me, because if it is true for me, then I have to live in a place of vulnerability. And vulnerability has caused me pain in the past. And what ends up happening is you exchange living in fear, or living in freedom, with living in fear. Because what God has for you is a freedom of not being worried all the time about what's coming next, or waiting for the other shoe to fall. And the choice then becomes, do I live in my fear because of my past? Or do I release that into God's hands and trust that God really does have a full life for me, and know that I can trust anything that comes my way, that I can handle it to the extent that nothing that God brings our way will crush us spiritually. That doesn't mean that our situations won't be difficult to handle, but that it won't crush us spiritually. I think oftentimes people mistake a lot of the Christianity concepts for behavior, that there's things that we must do and perform. And what God wants you to know is that He wants to heal your spirit so that you can live in a freedom that the world cannot give you. Some people have avoided the information altogether. Oftentimes I will speak about the whole concept of identity abuse and talk about the things that are shown in the video, and they'll say, but I don't have the time. Or they'll say, I watched it once, I know I need to watch it again, but I just don't have the time. So they will actually avoid the information, and that again is fear, because if I watch the information, that makes me responsible for it. And if I'm responsible for this information, I have to make a choice. And it's hard for me, sad for me, to watch people choose not to heal. It is a freedom that only God can give. And if you avoid the information, that keeps you where you're at. And that just is very difficult for me to watch. Some people actually reject and avoid that information. Another thing that I hear often is my situation isn't as bad as so-and-so's, or I've heard of other stories that are worse. And I call that comparative wounds. We compare our wounds with other people, and none of our wounds are as bad as Christ's wounds. No matter what we experience, Christ paid the ultimate price. And discussing Christ's wounds and the things that He went through for us, when He looks back at us, He doesn't say anything about the depth of our wounds, that we must suffer as much as He did to be worthy of His suffering. He simply suffered for us. And anytime that we experience something that wounds us, it doesn't matter what the next person is experiencing. If we're wounded, we're wounded. And He wants to heal that wound regardless of how deep it is. And He avails that for us simply by choice and allowing him to love us. And oftentimes I'll ask people, will you allow God to love you? Can you just sit and allow God to love you and heal those parts of you? And don't compare yourself to others, because he created you unique on purpose. And he enjoys who you are, and he wants to see you live that fulfilled life away from your wounds and not be identified by your wounds.